love sexy. I love bodies. We are going to talk about Sydney Sweeney. We're going to talk about Beyoncé. I love both of those ladies. We're going to talk about sexy branding. And we have to talk about who gets celebrated for it and who gets crucified. I know the Sydney Sweeney situation happened a few months ago, and I've been thinking about it a lot since then. And I felt weird about the situation at the time. And I think my outlook on this is going to be a little bit surprising to a lot of you guys. Welcome to Unearth with Shelly Hughes podcast. I'm Shelly Hughes. In this podcast, we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of building a passionate, profitable brand. We talk about the wins, the losses, and especially lessons learned about what it means to build a business you've always dreamt of. Things like this always come up. It's sexy branding, cultural backlash, kind of when it's okay to use some marketing that isn't always, the most PG, right? And I just want to let you know, like I said, I love when a brand is bold. And I love when a woman owns her image and when a campaign makes people really feel something. And I think the campaign with American Eagle really did just that with Sydney Sweeney a few months ago. And here's the thing, this isn't about canceling anyone or defending anything, but I think it's about calling out the double standard that we rarely really say out loud. So a couple months ago, there was a campaign by American Eagle starring Sydney Sweeney. Today, I really want to break down that denim campaign, one that had people really screaming eugenics and sexy all in the same breath. It's very odd and interesting situation. And what I want to do is unpack really what the backlash really says about not just Sydney, right? But what it says about us, what it says about to be sexy in the media, what brands risk when they really lean into controversy and things like that. So a little bit of campaign at a glance. It was American Eagle. Sydney Sweeney starred. The visuals are very glamorous denim shots. Sydney in a classic, very body-hugging jeans with some soft lighting and a confident, sensual presence. And I have some notes here just to make sure that I'm hitting everything I want to. The tagline was really what brought up such the anger and the backlash. And it was, Sydney Sweeney has great genes. And obviously that's a wordplay on jeans. Genes. And the rollout launch really during peak back to school season. I know a lot of our clients, we go really deep into that season and harness that season. And really it was timed for maximum Gen Z engagement. The backlash, though, the accusations of tone deafness due to the great genes pun, critics said that it implied genetic superiority, invoking a lot of eugenic themes. And then others claimed it promoted an outdated white beauty ideal. Not saying any of that is false. The response was really, I think, really interesting. American Eagle truly doubled down. And they said, quote, it's about the genes. Even President Trump, it turned into a political thing. Trump publicly praised the ad as the hottest, fueling a lot of that political discourse, which he loves to do. There's a media frenzy. There is very much boosting of the visibility for this campaign. I feel like the majority of us would never have seen this campaign if it wasn't for this media frenzy. I'm just, stating the facts. The market impact was crazy. The stock spiked 23% or so post that campaign. And despite the controversy, American Eagle gained massive cultural attention and investor interest. So my question is, was the campaign a success or was it a failure? Let's talk about why was there backlash. So critics' points basically said the great genes pun was seen as dangerously close to eugenics. Critics noted the emphasis on Sweeney's white, blue-eyed beauty was upholding really exclusionary beauty standards that I feel like the fashion industry has been trying to kind of ignore the past few years. It's so interesting. I used to work in video commercials and that kind of stuff. And whenever we would try to cast someone, we would always have to cast someone that was, someone that you couldn't really tell what their background was, or we always wanted to cast someone that was not white, essentially. Not always, but a lot of the time. people and clients really wanted that diversity. And I think we went through this whole phase of that. So much so, just to be completely transparent, and this is me coming from, a white woman, a lot of the white actors were losing out on parts that they were going to be perfect for. The target audience was probably white. And we went with individuals who looked a little bit more ambiguous in their background. And again, I'm not saying anything of this is bad. I'm just saying this was the reality of kind of this white, tall, and thin beauty standard, and how we kind of got into something that was very much more diverse, which, to be honest, I loved. But it kind of went 100% the other direction, and there was very much intentionality of making sure there was no whiteness in a lot of these commercials that we were doing. Again, I'm not saying it is a bad thing. I'm just stating the fact as I experienced it. But let's be honest. Does anyone disagree that Sydney Sweeney has great genes? And my question to you is, why is it so controversial to acknowledge beauty when it doesn't come wrapped in a political narrative? And the outrage, I believe, was not about genes. The outrage was about who is allowed to wear them and be adored for it. And look, I'm in marketing, I'm in video. I see what's going on, and I listen and I listen, and I sit with things before I, say anything about them, because I want to be truly educated. And I did really try to educate myself. I talked to friends who felt this way to just kind of see what was going on. But, I truly believe that people are increasingly uncomfortable with conventional beauty being celebrated unless it comes with a disclaimer. And I think the pressure to frame beauty through empowerment, the Dove campaign, I love the Dove campaign, and not attraction alone. And that changes who gets praised versus who kind of gets punished for it. And so let's compare and contrast a little bit. So Beyoncé, she did a very similar campaign a few years ago, and it was it was a very sexy campaign, and she was celebrated for owning her sensuality. She was seen as empowering, artistic. She was seen as being very intentional with what she was doing and who she was working with. And her sexiness was framed as cultural expression when she was doing a campaign very similar. And even just in general, that's how she, like, Beyoncé is extremely sexy, but it's framed in this like empowering and artistic and like culturally significant way, which I just honestly I adore. I adore her branding, I adore her music, I adore everything she does. That's one kind of sexy. Then there's kind of the Sabrina Carpenter sexy, right? I don't think she was never in a campaign like this, but she's also highly sexualized. But this is more in a softer, more palatable aesthetic, right? Her demographic is definitely much younger, so she has to be a little bit more innocent in her sexy. But you can't deny that's part of her branding. And her sex appeal is very playful, it's veiled, therefore much less polarizing. Let's talk about Sydney Sweeney for a second, right? I remember Sydney Sweeney I saw her first in Handmaid's Tale. She was all covered up, right? But can we be very, very clear that the second she got on, she kind of got on the map, anyone that saw her realized that she had amazing genes. She has an incredible body. You go, girl. But what's so interesting is that her sexy was bold. It was direct. She did a campaign with Ford. It was incredibly sexy, hyper feminine, unfiltered. And her beauty doesn't come from or with activism or artistry. It's just plain hot. And my question is, why do we celebrate some forms of eroticism and then shame others? And, we can go so deep into this of like what is allowed in our community and what's not, and what's frowned upon and what's not. And we can go into, the saying the word slut. We could go so deep, and we're not going to get into it yet. My question is, like, is it the aesthetic, the body, or the branding that makes it okay? And so I thought about this a lot, and I was like, okay, why did American Eagle do this? let's think about kind of what their intended, who was the audience, who was their intended target. It was definitely Gen Z women via glam, denim nostalgia. I mean, Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake was all over that campaign. And it was for retail traders and a lot of that meme culture. And as a lot of these kind of Gen Z brands know, that meme-worthy ads equals a huge spike in stock. If you're a publicly traded company and you have to put out quarterly reports, unfortunately, that's kind of one of the main things you're focused on. How can you make your shareholders more money? And it was really politically disengaged, but culturally reactive in its viewership, right? And there were some unintended consequences with that. So I am just like writing out some notes here. So I believe it definitely alienated some progressive consumers who really saw the ad as regressive, right? Kind of going backwards. I mean, you saw there was Fabletics had, they started a campaign and Victoria's Secret started campaigns with, plus size models, which I love. I love it. I just want to make that super clear. And a lot of these progressive consumers saw the ad kind of went backwards from that. And it really spiked some there was a lot of kind of separation politically too, which in my mind, it might not serve American Eagle in the long run. It definitely gave it a 25%, spike in its stock short term. Long term, will it, that cultural polarization, will that serve American Eagle in the long time? I don't know. But what I do know, what I feel, is that if you're making a statement against your critics rather than for your audience, your marketing is more protest than strategy, meaning sometimes that's the point, but it better be intentional, right? They might have known. And some brands, when you think of like Bud Light, right? When they had, a transgender individual on their commercial, right? That was a very interesting approach. Let's think about who Budweiser's main audience is. Their main audience is not necessarily redneck, but it's kind of this manly man who drinks beer that tastes like beer, right? And I guess their intention was to expand their audience. And when a brand tries to expand their audience, but ignores and maybe even goes against not the values, but goes against kind of what their current audience expects, it typically doesn't turn out well. And not that all Budweiser, drinkers don't appreciate transgender people, but you could tell they were trying so hard to get into this market. It was so inauthentic to the brand. And when we think of American Eagle, sexy branding absolutely works. So let's talk about kind of when it works and when it backfires. So when it works, I believe sexy branding works when it is aligned with the individual's brand. Sweeney is sexy. That's it. If you were trying to bring in like Mary Poppins, it would not work. It would be really uncomfortable, right? It works when it's consistent with the company's voice and values. It's like it's bringing up. It's very much like Dove, right? It's like bringing up like hyper feminism, right? And getting people excited about, wearing clothes that make them feel good and make them feel good and look good. And sexy branding works when it speaks to an audience, not just about a product. And I think this campaign did that through and through. When it backfires though, it backfires when it feels like a gimmick or a shortcut to attention. Sexy branding backfires when the message conflicts with the brand history or audience values. And I think that's exactly where Budweiser didn't do a great job. Is the brand history was so focused on one direction and it was so strong in one direction that when it tried to make a left-hand turn, it came off as just really inauthentic. And it backfired. Sexy branding also backfires when it becomes the point, not the platform. When this campaign of like being sexy becomes the whole campaign instead of it being the delivery of the campaign, right? And it's, and you can tell a lot of times when brands have to force it, right? For example, there's this thing that in marketing that says, actually, not marketing. My husband told me this, and he is not in marketing at all. He works at a hospital, and he's a technologist, and he was saying he's into trucks, and he was saying that he heard one time that when truck brands have their commercials talking about patriotism, America, all that kind of stuff, it means they are in the decline, right? They have to pull something out of their butts that, that boosts sales quickly. And America and patriotism does just that. It's kind of like that forcing of a statement because they feel like they have to, and it's not aligned. It's just generic, right? So my advice for brands is sexy branding isn't a shortcut. It's a sharp tool, and if you're not careful, you can just easily cut the wrong thing. Again, I love sexy branding. I love women who own it. I love campaigns that take risks. But I also love truth. And the truth is we don't treat all sexy the same. And my reaction to this campaign told us more about us than it did about Sweeney. And it revealed the lines we still draw between empowerment and exploitation, often pretty unfairly. And so I want to leave you with kind of a challenge, right? Next time you see a campaign like this, ask yourself, am I reacting to the content or to the person who dared to star in it? So I apologize that this was a little bit controversial. Actually, I don't really apologize. I've been thinking about this for a couple months now, since the campaign came out, sometime this summer. And I was trying to figure, because I saw both sides of the spectrum, and I saw both sides of the argument. And I was really trying to figure out what I believed in the campaign. And I don't know, this is like months later, but I think it's still relevant because another campaign like this is going to come about. So look, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I hope it helped you think about, when you do want to add sexy, and because sex sells, how to do it in a good way. And I am putting my foot down, and I believe that American Eagle, they did it the right way. It aligned with their values, it aligned with their history, and they got a damn good actress to play the starring role. So guys, if you like this podcast episode, please let me know. Rate, review, and let me know if you disagree. Let me know if you agree. And I hope to see you next week.